Hey everybody, it's Mike Wittes from Cubalaya Outfitters. Today I'm going to take you through our Fair Chase click and pull reel, show you how to disassemble it, show you how to switch the winding direction with the one-way bearing, and give you some pointers on servicing it. So this is our 912 model. We also have a 6.8. They come apart the same way, same components inside for the most part, so you can follow along with that. So let's start with this is the reel hanging off the rod. You have your rooster head vertical like that. That's how we want that to be. That's when that knob is tight. Everything's where it should be. So to disassemble it, we're going to take this knob. I recommend grabbing it first by hand. If not, use a towel or a glove. If it's too tight, do not put pliers on it. You will damage the coating on it. But we just simply unscrew this cap. It's going to draw the spool up off of the frame. So we're going to turn it to the left. As you can see, the frame is moving, the spool is moving away from the frame, and once it's off the threads, we can just take the spool off. Now we've got the inside of the reel, the frame. We have our clicker on top, clicker on the bottom. This is our clicker gear, and this is our one-way bearing. So to change the direction, all we need to do is simply flip this one-way bearing over, and we do that by lifting it off the shaft, and you kind of rotate it as it comes up, taking this, turning it 180 degrees or flipping it over, and putting it back on the shaft. And if you twist it in the direction it rolls, it'll sit right back down. It is critical that this washer sitting beneath it is sitting flat down on the face. If it's off center at all and not in the shoulder position, you can see there's a notch there. Okay, if it's off center, this bearing's not going to go all the way down, the spool's not going to go all the way down, and you won't be able to tighten the center cap all the way, and you'll have a problem. So make sure that's sitting flat like that. Bearing goes back on just like that. There's two flat sides on the outside of this bearing race, and there's two flat sides on the inside of the spool here. So you can just eyeball to see where that is, and the spool will sit back down on that. From that point on, you're just going to gently wind this, being sure to catch the threads correctly, and it's going to draw the spool back down onto the frame. And again, rooster head vertical, everything's tight now. Give it a good snug up. Winds nice in the line pickup direction, clicks out on the outbound. That is how you take the spool off. Now, to go one step further into how to service this, we'll do the same thing. We're going to take the center cap, back it off, and if for some reason the center cap comes off of the spool, I'll show you here, it's not a problem. This cap has an O-ring on it. Okay, so it simply snaps on, and it sits there and will rotate. So it should stay in place, but if not, not a problem. At this point, if you want to remove a clicker, you can do so by taking these two screws out. This cap will come off and you can remove the pawl from it, and that will effectively put the reel in a single clicker scenario where you're only using the clicker opposite of the one you removed. To do that, you remove these two screws, the cap comes off and the pawl comes out. I'm going to show you with my oversized screwdriver because I'm at home. But we take these two screws out, make sure you have a screwdriver that fits. Nice to have this clicker gear out of the way. And then once the screws are loose, this cap will just lift off. Now, this is a new reel, so it's freshly greased. But what you'll find is this clicker pawl has a hole in it. Okay, and this cap on the underside has a pin basically coming out of it, and that's what that clicker pawl sits on. So it rides on that pin and it rotates around it just like that. So with it out, you can see the spring in here, and if you want to remove the spring you can, but you can leave it in just as well. The spring sits in these two pockets, as you can see, these triangle pockets here, and it has a little bit of preload in it, so it's got a little tension in it when it's set in place. To put it back together, if you clean this out, so you have sand in the reel or whatever, just a little dot of grease from the grease syringe that we provide, okay, about the eraser tip of a pencil is more than sufficient. And then you set the pawl back down up against the spring just like this, because that's where it's going to ride when the cap's on. We'll take the cap, we will line up the pin with the hole in the pawl, just like that, and now it's kind of sitting here. And what you do at that point is you want to slide this back and up basically into the spring, and you'll feel that little pin will sit down inside the frame hole. There's a hole in the frame where it sits, and when it's sitting there, you can see that these holes now line up, and this is sitting nice and flat. And to test, you can just go ahead and move the pawl from left to right. You'll feel it. It shouldn't bind up at all. It should be nice and free and pushing on the spring in both directions. Okay. At that point, we can take our 2 screws, being careful not to over tighten them, put them back in the cap, and just snug them up lightly, okay? Because we want to make sure everything's in place. So if we just gently tighten them, again, we go back, check and make sure our clicker is clicking. Now we can go and just snug these up just a little bit more. It doesn't take a lot. It's held together pretty well. Now your pawl is back in place, okay? Again, this clicker gear will slide right down in the center with the bearing and everything together. And now we can put the spool back on. In certain instances, the clicker bearing, the one-way bearing will be inside of the spool when you remove the spool, just like this, okay? And it's hard to get out. You can't really reach your finger in it. You can't really get to the other side. So there's a trick, and the trick is if you take a Sharpie, the back side of a Sharpie pen or marker, this nice plastic, okay, we're not going to use a screwdriver or anything metal because we'll damage the reel. And we take that and we put it in at just an angle like this and apply some pressure, and that little bushing will pop out, okay? Once the bushing is out, if the bearing is in here a little tight, you can then push your finger in and push the bearing out the back, okay? We also like to put a little bit of grease on the outside of this or on the inside of here, just to keep water and any corrosion or condensation out of there as well, okay? Putting it back together, again, we take this bushing that we just took out, it's stepped at the bottom, it fits down in here, and we set it on top of the spool, and you'll see it's a little tight, and we're just gonna push on it until it snaps down right back where it goes. And you can push it down nice and hard, make sure it's all the way in there. It should be nice and flush all the way around on the face of it, okay? And that is how we access the bearing if we have to push it out of there. And now, again, we can put this back together. Oh, before we get there, if in fact you just want to grease the clickers, which we recommend doing, and you don't have sand or something you need to clean out of here, that syringe that we supply can be pushed up against these little holes on these covers, and you can squirt a little bit of grease and it'll put it right between the pawl and the spring, which is exactly where we want it. And it doesn't take much, just a little bit. You might see it ooze out of here a little bit. You can wipe it off, but that's more than enough. It only takes a little bit. That grease helps with the temperature of the metal on metal that when the spring is engaged on the pawl. So there's another little trick. If you have the cap off, okay, and it's not on the reel, if it's easier sometimes to start the threading, you can put the cap on, get it started a couple turns. We're trying to pull up on it and see if this comes off, and it's not, so I know it's down there good. And then we take the reel and the spool, and you'll hear this probably, but you pull away and it'll snap the O-ring in, just like that. And now we can finish winding the knob down, just like that, all the way tight. And again, our rooster head is facing up. If the rooster head is twisted like this is gonna back off when you pull line off or when you wind up, and the spool is gonna come loose. We don't want that. If for some reason the rooster head isn't lining up, something's not in place inside the reel, so you can pop the spool off, figure out which part it is, and then put it back together. So now we snug that back up. We've now changed the direction of wind. We've also showed you how to go in and kind of service this. And then as always, we recommend rinsing, always rinsing. Water's not gonna hurt it. And keeping up with maintenance on your equipment is one of the most important things. So we encourage you, if you have any questions, to email us, call us, and get a hold of us any way you can, and we're happy to help you if you get stuck in the process. Thanks for watching.